Happy Friday, Hokie Nation. As always, welcome back to the Friday Q&A. As students are moving in, things are getting going in Blacksburg. And before we get into everything, how about some introductions? I'm Robert Bateman. Joined alongside me is Chris Coleman on set. And behind the scenes, as always, is our producer, Nick Brown. Let's jump right into it. So before we hop into our fan questions, Chris, I know you're a big soccer guy, and Virginia Tech men's soccer just had a huge 1-0 upset over number 3 Ohio State last night, and I was just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great win. Sometimes, it was a deflected goal, of course, to go in, but the big thing there is you kept a clean sheet. Anytime you can keep a clean sheet, you give yourself a chance to win. So it was great to see the organization and the effort on defense like that. And that's a great start. That's if they do competently in ACC play this year, then they've got that huge non-conference win over a top 5 team under their belt, and that really helps the resume.
And we'll see how consistent they can be scoring the ball. And right now, we've seen women's soccer blow everybody out of the water.
Speaking of scoring, they scored 9 goals in 3 games. I mean, they put 4 past Clemson the game after. Actually, excuse me, I guess they've scored 11. Yeah, they've scored 11 goals in 3 games, 9 goals in their last 2 games, and that's with Taylor Price, their top scorer, only playing in 1 game because she's coming off that injury suffered last year in the NCAA tournament. Very entertaining game last night. Anytime you beat somebody 4-0. It's a big game. It included a goal from midfield, just about. Just really entertaining product. They've got Virginia Tech athletics off to a winning start this year. So Virginia Tech, as an athletic department, so far this academic year is unbeaten in sports.
So that's kind of what I want to ask you about. Yeah. How important is it just for the whole athletic department to stay hot right now? It seems like we really have seen every sport that's played, which is just soccer, really kind of set the standard for the rest of the other teams.
I think so. I mean, I think if you're another team, you're looking at what they're doing right now, and you're saying, okay, now it's our turn, right? Now, obviously, they're not going to go undefeated or anything like that, but it's good momentum for everybody, and a positive for the fan base as we get into the swing of things.
All right. Well, now we'll kind of jump into more football and ask some of the fan questions. We start with Hokie Hill 1117, who wants to know, pretend you're in Whit's seat and the Board of Visitors meets your request and increases the athletic department budget to $200 million. What would your new budget priorities be?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, for me personally, football and men's basketball are always the most important. They are the only 2 sports pretty much anywhere at any school to turn a profit. We talk about revenue sports and things like that, but these days, because of the ACC network, all sports are really revenue sports. They all generate revenue in some way, but only 2 of them are profitable. Tech is probably near the bottom of the ACC in basketball spending. They don't have a big arena. And they don't need a big arena for the geographic area they're in, but they can't bring in like that corporate money for basketball, like a Louisville who has suites and things like that in their basketball arena. So I think for me is you get your football staffing up to snuff. You ask Brent Pry what he needs from a staffing standpoint. I think there's things they can do with training and recovery in that sport, and men's basketball, recruiting budgets and such things. It's and then you prioritize your other sports after that. Like, where does Virginia Tech have the best chance to win in the other sports? And for me, that means investing in the programs that you're already good at. So your wrestlings, your women's soccer, softball, things like that.
So now we can flip the script a little bit and say you're a Board of Visitors member. What questions do you have for Whit after his presentation? What fundraising challenge or moratorium would you give the Virginia Tech AD in your 30-day assessment by September 30th, 2025 to raise, say, $50 million or $62.5 million to help the cause?
Yeah, when you give a presentation like that, look, Whit knows he's not getting all of that $50 million or whatever it was he asked for. He knows that. You throw a number out there and you basically put it on the Board of Visitors to say, okay, what's the priority for you? Now, obviously, football and men's basketball are the top 2 priorities. So if I'm the Board of Visitors, I'm asking a couple questions. Like, he made a presentation and he said, $52 million or something like that, and here's what it would cost to do each one of these things, whether it's facilities, whether it's increased football support, whether it's increased Olympic sports support, things like that. I would come back and ask him, okay, prioritize each one of those things, 1 through 25 or however many line items there were on there. Prioritize those things. What's most important? What's least important? Because it's going to be very difficult to come up with, $50 million just like that. So what if you could only come up with 30? Well, how should we spend that 30? Which items off your list get cut or delayed or whatever? The other thing I would ask him, and my personal issues have been staffing in the athletic department. When people leave, a lot of times they aren't adequately replaced. They went 5 or 6 years without a chief financial officer, which doesn't make any sense at all for an athletic department that has millions of dollars in revenue. Their last couple of heads of the Hokie Club don't have a background in fundraising. I would ask him for a comparison of Virginia Tech and the other state schools in the ACC when it comes to athletic department staffing and Hokie Club staffing. Are we adequately staffed at the athletic department level, and are we adequately staffed at the Hokie Club level? I don't think we can maximize fundraising efforts unless we maximize the resources for the Hokie Club itself. I mean, you have to spend money to make money. So yes, the university's got to pitch in more, I think. I agree completely with Whit on that. But I also think there's more they can do as an athletic department to get the most out of what they have right now.
So let me throw a hypothetical at you real quick. If, say, we get that money and then we invest in the staffing, how much of an impact do you think that will make on the field?
Florida State spends a lot of money, and they went 2-10 last year, right? So they spent a lot more money than Virginia Tech to go 2-10. It's all about how you spend the money and who you spend it on. I think Mike Norville had a magical run a couple of years ago with a really great quarterback, but there's so much player turnover every year that you don't know what you're going to have from a meshing standpoint. And so I think you've really got to get your scouting department right. And not only scouting for players' strengths and weaknesses and talent level and things like that, but you've got to do your due diligence on personalities and whether they're good teammates and things like that. And I think that does require an experienced staff. I don't think you can fill up your recruitment staff with just a bunch of people fresh out of college who haven't done it before. So get some experienced heads in there and guys who have proven that they know what they're doing. And yeah, it could definitely make a difference. But and Pry's got to prove it too. One of the line items on there was like $10 million for a head coach. All right, so that doesn't mean that university's going to pitch in all that money and they're just going to automatically increase Brent Pry's salary to $10 million. What they're saying is, this is what a number of other schools are spending, like Clemson and UNC and Florida State and Georgia's and Alabama's and Ohio State's and things like that. It's like, okay, we would like to have that kind of money to spend if Brent Pry gets it turned around and shows that he warrants that type of salary, or if at some point you have to go in another direction, you have that money to go out there and hire someone proven.
It becomes a luxury.
Right.
All right. Well, our last fan question comes from the VT Voice, who asked, why is Kentucky versus Virginia Tech not as sexy as a matchup compared to Tennessee versus Virginia Tech? They're both border states. And what about Penn State versus VT compared to the Gamecocks versus VT matchup? Which here would be more appealing to Virginia Tech fans? Which of these 4 team options is the best as far as fan interest, viewership, and revenue goes for Virginia Tech? I'm thinking primarily football for all these scenarios.
Yeah, I think the main thing is Kentucky's not football first. I think they've got a good football fan base. They've got a 65,000 seat stadium. I'd like to play Kentucky in a home and home. It'd be good, but let's face it, their fan base is basketball first. Whereas Tennessee, even though arguably, over the last 10 years or so, they've been better at basketball, they are still a football-centric fan base. Penn State, football-centric fan base. South Carolina, football-centric fan base. So I think that's why Kentucky probably lags behind those other three schools from a Virginia Tech perspective on who do you want to play? Who does the fan base want to play? I think I would rank them in order, probably Penn State number one because Tennessee number one. Southwest Virginia and Eastern Tennessee, they kind of bleed together, right? There's a lot of similarities there. Penn State would be number two, a very close number two. And I fully recognize that probably Tech alums from Northern Virginia a lot of them would probably prefer Penn State because they don't necessarily have the Southwest Virginia ties outside of spending 4 years in Blacksburg. I think South Carolina is intriguing when Shane Beamer's there, but if he wasn't there, then they would rank third behind Tennessee and Penn State. I think him being at South Carolina adds a little more juice, as Andy Bitter would put it, and I would rank Kentucky fourth on that list. I think they would all be ESPN games if Virginia Tech was able to schedule them. Unfortunately, to Whit's credit, he got a home and home with Penn State, and then COVID happened. And that stinks for the fan base. That would have been a great series for the fan base. My understanding is that Tennessee, outside of the Bristol game, which was a one-off neutral site game in a place nobody had ever played, for a lot of money, outside of that, Tennessee has always rebuffed Virginia Tech's overtures for a home and home. Mm-hmm. They have no interest in it. So it's hard to imagine that game happening, although one of the directives from the SEC, I think, that came out yesterday with their scheduling model is they want all their teams to schedule a non-conference game against another Power 4 opponent. Somebody joked in our TSL Slack that, Tennessee will probably schedule UVA now to fulfill their requirement for that. But it takes two to tango, and Tennessee's never showed any interest in that. So
VT Voice is curious about football, but I kind of want to get your thoughts on basketball too. Are there any out of those four that you would want to see the most on the court?
Basketball scheduling is different. I get that even now that basketball goes into that new revenue sharing agreement in the ACC where your high profile games make more money. But to me, it doesn't quite move the needle as much in basketball. Basketball, you need to schedule to make the NCAA tournament. And I think going back to 18 ACC games, the reason they did that is so you could schedule two more bad teams and get your efficiency. Everybody in the conference gets their efficiency ratings up by winning two extra non-conference games. And then they start playing each other, and all of a sudden you're playing teams that are ranked higher in the efficiency ratings. The Big Ten and the Big 12 and now the SEC, they've been doing that for quite a while now, and the ACC, of course, is behind. It's just a bunch of old school coaches who didn't really understand scheduling, and now I think they've got a better plan going forward and should be able to compete better for those spots as a result. But, I don't see, you would have to win the game. Yes, Virginia, a home and home with Tennessee in basketball would be great if Virginia Tech won that game. But if you lose it, it just means you drop in the efficiency ratings, and you could have played Maryland Eastern Shore and beat them by 40 and got your efficiency ratings up higher. It's a little bit different in basketball.
Maybe it's a game you throw right before you start the ACC season up so that you're tuned up going into it.
Maybe if you were going to do it. Like I said, there's just so many facts. I want that NCAA tournament. Yeah. And I think everything you do from a scheduling standpoint should go towards making the NCAA tournament.
Well, okay. And before we get out of here, Tech Sideline, as always, is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. Manage your money with ease. First Bank and Trust Company's industry-leading digital banking experience provides you with all the essential tools to manage your full banking relationship from one convenient platform. Access digital banking through the online banking login on desktop and tablet devices or on the go through the First Bank and Trust Company mobile banking app. Who you choose to bank with can make all the difference. Choose First Bank and Trust Company with over 30 locations in Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee. Thank you guys so much for your suggestions. As always, be sure to drop more comments down in the comment section or questions that you have to be featured on next week's video. For Nick Brown behind the set, Chris Coleman right next to me. I'm Robert Bateman. Happy Friday, and we'll see you next week.